Are we online on YouTube and recording yet?
We are.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Budget Committee. My name is Deirdre Bartman, Chair of the committee. Today's agenda involves a briefing by the Provincial Treasury on the 2020-2021 annual report process pertaining to departments and entities of the Provincial Government of the Western Cape, as well as an overview by the Auditor General of South Africa on these audit outcomes in terms of relevant legislation for the Western Cape provincial departments and entities. We will also be dealing with set of minutes as well as our committee quarterly report. I have received apologies from the National Treasury as they are engaged with the MPBPTS process, as well as Member Mackenzie, and that Member Bosman is standing in for the member. And that Minister Maine will be joining us for a short time in the beginning of the meeting for similar reasons in terms of the MPBTS. Members, as usual, I'm going to ask that you please introduce yourself, and then I'm going to allow for the Minister and Department to introduce themselves, as well as the team of the Auditor General. And then we will jump straight into the two presentations, starting with Provincial Treasury, followed by questions and answers. I'm just quickly going to mute everyone at the start of the meeting. Just do that. Perfect. And should you wish to ask a question, or if you're on the floor for the presentation, you are welcome to unmute or put your video on. And for the rest of the meeting, I'm just going to put my video off as well for connectivity purposes. Thank you so much. If members can introduce themselves.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Member Brankesh here.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning,
Chairperson.
Thank you, Member Philander and Member Wimby.
Good morning, Chairperson, and to the rest of the members and to the staff members. I'm Lulama Mvimbi, the member of the committee.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning all. My name is Derek America, and I'm an alternate member. Thank you.
Morning.
Good morning, Chair and officials. Regan Allen.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. My name is Matlodi Maseko.
Morning.
Morning, Chairperson, and everybody. My name is Nomin Kondlo.
Morning, morning.
Good morning, colleagues. I'm Killian Postman.
Morning.
Good morning, Mireille Wenger, alternate member.
Morning, morning. Okay, I think those are all the members that I see on the participation list on the side. Provincial Treasury, if you can introduce your delegation to us, please.
Good morning, Chairperson, and good morning, honourable members. I'm Aziz Harding from the Provincial Treasury, as well as the Western Cape Provincial Accountant General, and I'll be responsible for the Provincial Treasury presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else present from Provincial Treasury today?
Good morning. My name is Adila Abu, also from Provincial Treasury, and I'm joined with my team, Mr. Frank Jacobs and Loiso Faniso. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I just want to check, is the Auditor General online yet, or will they be joining us a little bit later for their presentation?
Chairperson, I have seen the Auditor General colleagues in the House, and I think I saw Liesl Kloo, who is the Deputy Business or Unit Leader.
Okay, I see Mr. van der Hoeven also joined now. If someone from the AG could just introduce their delegation to us, please.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, members. Thank you very much for the invitation to attend this meeting. Our delegation today will be led by our Acting Business Unit Leader, Mr. Ashley Alkes. He will do the presentation. He's just in an energy portfolio meeting, but he will be joining shortly, but he will lead the delegation. Then I have present Liesl Kloo, a Acting Deputy Business Unit Leader. Mr. Walid Haynes will also join us a little bit later. And then a number of senior managers will also join the meeting today. I trust that's in order, Chair.
Thank you so much. But Mr. Hardin, with that, you can jump straight into the Provincial Treasury presentation. I trust that members have all read it. So if whoever is flighting the presentation, you just put it up for us. Thank you. You may go ahead.
Thank you, Chairperson. So the role of the Provincial Treasury today is really to take you through the annual report process and the guidelines that are provided to the departments and the public entities in preparation for the annual report and the most important sitting, or one of the most important sittings, which is the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. The way the presentation has been structured is really talking you through the structure of the annual report, and the members are welcome to note some questions on each of the sections so that we could try and respond. Hopefully, Chairperson, the questions could be fielded at the end of the presentation. Now, the presentation is approximately 42 slides, sorry, 54 slides, but we're going to try and condense it so that we highlight only the important sections because the presentation has been prepared in a detailed fashion so that when you go away, you could actually sit with the annual report, the presentation next to you, and you can see what are the key areas from certain aspects of the presentation. Now, when you look at the structure of the introduction really speaks to what the Provincial Treasury does through the processes during the year is to ensure that the annual report complies with the statutory and policy requirements. On an annual basis, National Treasury provides all departments and public entities in the country with what are the requirements for what needs to be in the annual report. The guide is given on an annual basis and it's refined based on sittings that comes up during the year and across all the provinces, and National Treasury becomes the author of the revised guideline. Importantly, the annual report is a public document and it is an opportunity for the department and the public entities to indicate what are their significant achievements. The publishing of both the financial and the non-financial information, it very importantly works towards promoting accountability and transparency, and it improves the trust and the confidence on the government services that gets delivered. Anybody who does not necessarily have a detailed understanding of how government finances works, the annual report is set up in a reader-friendly fashion so that it can be easily followed. All the annual reports are particularly structured in a certain way so that there is both consistency, that when you pick up one department's annual report and you pick up another department's annual report, you know that there are certain key criteria that will be included in the annual report. The reported information, importantly, must be balanced and it must be accurate. And for that reason, the audit report becomes an important document because the Auditor General, apart from auditing the annual financial statements, they also review the information in the annual report to make sure that there is nothing contradictory in the annual report that contradicts the annual financial statements. Moving on, I think all the members may be aware of the important accounting cycle. Starting with, on an annual basis, the department starts with a strategic plan. On a 5-year basis, there's a strategic plan. It's updated annually, but something more concrete on an annual basis is the annual performance plan. So then we move on to the medium-term budget, and that is also an annual process that is implemented, and that tells you for the next financial year and the 3 successive years how the money will be spent. This is obviously iterated on an annual basis, depending on what are the final budget allocations that comes from, whether it be the equitable share from National Treasury and whether it be the own revenue from the departments. Every department then, once they have their budget for the year that's allocated to them, they prepare individual performance plans. It's known colloquially as the annual performance plan. And that annual performance plan is actually an indication of what are the targets and the performance indicators that department sets out for themselves. On a monthly basis, the departments, they prepare in-year monitoring reports, and on a quarterly basis, they have the quarterly performance reports, and that's just a check-in on a quarterly basis that the departments are still on track for what they promised to deliver with the money that was allocated to them. That culminates in an annual report, which the members will be receiving or may have already received, and to be used in the Standing Committee of Public Accounts sessions that's planned for November and later on in the year. And this is part of the annual review process that the members does in terms of their oversight role. In terms of specifically for the standing committees, really it's about the evaluation of the performance of the department or the public entity by assessing the level of service delivery against the annual performance indicators that has been given in the budget documents. And it also assesses whether the performance information clearly shows the department and the entity's achievements against the targets, because these targets as well, they culminate into the provincial strategic plan. By looking at all of the annual performance plans, when we add it up collectively, it should culminate in what the province delivers in terms of the provincial strategic plan. It's important for the members to understand the reasons for deviations from targets. And you would also find that in the Auditor General's report, where a department or an entity has not met their target, there will be a specific explanation. And this is where the audit report will indicate either the achievement of targets or the non-achievement of targets with an explanation for any deviations. The AG would normally draw attention where there has been significant deviations from targets, and the departments or entities have an opportunity to explain why there were those deviations or non-meeting of the targets. It's important that the oversight body understands that when we report transparently, we are able to hold all of the institutions accountable for what they promise to deliver. Now, if you look at the annual report, every annual report is made up of 5 key sections. The first section will deal with general information. Now, if you look at general information, what could be expected to be found in the general information? Here is the study of the departments, specifically who the head of department is, who the key management in that department is. Members would be able to find government is slewed with a lot of abbreviations and acronyms, and each department would have somewhere in the annual report a discussion of what each of the items or abbreviations means. There will be a forward by the minister, and this is actually, the only requirement is that the minister has to have a forward. There is no set guideline for what needs to be in that forward, and it's normally an acknowledgement by the minister of the work that the department does. Very importantly is the report of the accounting officer. The accounting officer is the accountable individual for the department. And in here, there are insights about the year that has happened and what is still to come. What are the major achievements and what was the significant matters that impacted the department. So the accounting officer report is a key document. What we then have is a statement of responsibility and confirmation that the annual report is an accurate reflection of what has happened for the year under review. You'll then find a strategic overview, both you'll have the vision, the mission, and the values of the entity. You'll have the legislative and other mandates, the organizational structure, as well as the entities that reports to that minister or the MEC. This is the part A, and it really just has general information, and it is amended on an annual basis. Specifically, the accounting officer's report, it is amended on an annual basis to give a high-level, almost executive summary of what's happened in the department. The next section in an annual report will cover the performance information. Now, the performance information, one of the key sections or one of the key matters that the performance information section of the annual report has is the Auditor General's report on predetermined objectives. It must be clear that in the audit report issued by the AG, there is a section that deals with the financial statements, there is a section that deals with the performance information, and there is a section that deals with compliance with laws and regulations. On the section that deals with the performance information, the Auditor General will have a clear statement that indicates there are either material findings on the performance information, or there will be a paragraph that will say there are we have not identified material instances of whether the information was useful or reliable. So there will be a clear statement on whether or not the performance information is accurate and is complete. Excuse me. That deals with the Auditor General's report. Then on the service delivery environment, the department then has an opportunity to give an overview of the service delivery that occurred within that department. There's normally a contextual paragraph, as well as sketching the environment of what's happened. And then also there's a well-balanced overview of the service delivery environment. Commentaries provided on the departmental services that is delivered, as well as any problems encountered when providing these services. And members can well imagine that during COVID, the annual reports or the performance indicators had been set up in a time when COVID wasn't a reality. So it is expected that when comparing what's happened in the period of COVID to when a plan had not been set up for a period of COVID, that there may have been some deviations, but that would be highlighted in every department and in every public entity's annual report. And then importantly, what is also provided is the performance information would describe any significant developments that is key for the understanding of oversight to understand what's happened to at the department. The next couple of slides really is more detailed information on the performance information. It goes into the various, the organizational environment, the challenges, and I think that the detail here, it's really just for the members to go through. If they needed to understand more in terms of their preparation for the scope of sessions, if they needed to understand what are the key things that they may be highlighted. There isn't anything specifically that we wanted to highlight, but it's just for the members to take note in terms of what is important for the members to take especially notice of. What you will find in every performance information section of the annual report is that there is a table, and it's normally given in tabular format where each department has to list the outcomes per program that each of the programs within a department subscribes to. Each program will then be divided into sub-programs and what are those key performance indicators. And then each program and sub-program will have specific indicators that is measured on a quarterly basis. Then in the tabular format, you'll also have a column that speaks to the what the department indicated for their actual achievement, and the committee members have the assurance that it's actually been audited. Any particular column, you can have the assurance that it's been audited, because the Auditor General, one of the requirements is that they go through each of the performance indicators and the evidence that's provided against that performance indicators. The department will also have indicated what was their planned annual targets and how have they performed against those annual targets and what was the actual achievement. But I guess the most important thing when it comes to the difference between planned and actual is for the members to take note. If there was a variance, what was the explanations for the variance? And sometimes there would also be deviations against planned targets, but the department would in here indicate that if there was a deviation, what was the reasons for those deviations. The next couple of slides, importantly in every annual report, there is a section where the department would indicate going forward what is the strategy that they're going to implement to overcome any areas of underperformance. There's as well, the departments have been asked to respond or to report on, specifically, especially now since March 2020, what was the institutional response against COVID-19? And again, here the oversight committees are able to compare department by department what was the response of every department and every public entity. What the report also does is it tries to link the performance information with the budgets, and it will give you a summary of the actual expenditure in comparison to the adjusted appropriation, which normally happens around October or November of a particular financial year. The information is there to reflect the sub-program level, and similarly to what is sitting in the annual financial statements, where you have the appropriation statement, and you have every program and sub-program in numbers. The performance information will indicate every program and sub-program in words. So you would have in the section E of the annual report, you have the numbers, and in section B, you have the narrative that goes with those numbers. I cannot stress enough that the reasons for deviations will be included, and it is for the Oversight Committee. Understanding that it has been audited, if there are any questions to the departments, it would come from the reasons for the variations. The departments are also expected to report on how the expenditure has contributed to the achievements. Moving on, in the performance information, you would also have an indication of the level of transfer payments that are made to public entities and how that money has been used and what services are delivered for those transfer payments that the public entities get. There is also a further indication of transfer payments to all organizations that are not public entities, and you'd find this where a department utilizes specific sectors of the industry to assist in delivering their mandate. This is where you'll find the information in terms of who has received the money, what was the total of money that was transferred. The department has a responsibility in terms of the PFMA section 38, where there has to be adequate control over the money that is given to that public or to that non-public entity, but also an entity that assists the department in delivering on their mandate. And then there also has to be an indication of the money that's been transferred, how much of that money has been spent or hasn't been spent, and then an indication of why the money has not been spent to the extent that it has been received. Moving on the performance information, again, here would be a section of all of the conditional grants received from the transferring department. It could be a national department transferring a conditional grant to a provincial department. And here you just have general information regarding the monies that's been spent against those conditional grants. Nothing really standing out. It's just a further unpacking of if it's not evident in the annual financial statements, here you will have a narrative that speaks to the conditional grants. The next slide would speak to if there were any earmark funds and how that has to be, or how that is further narrated in the annual report. And it's again an understanding of the various sources of funds that the department gets in order to deliver their mandate. They would explain it further in the annual report under the section of conditional grants. Importantly, there is also a section that speaks to donor funds, and the donor funds would have an elaboration of both cash received as well as in-kind contributions. Now, in the period of COVID-19, the departments, the government had received an outpour of assistance, and that outpour of assistance will come in this section where there had been in-kind contributions. The department would now make transparent what was the contributions received in a period where the entire country and the globe was under disaster in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic. The reporting on the donor assistance is critical because it does assist in the service delivery of the department. So it is an important area that the Oversight Committee will look at. Then for those donor funds, the members would have insight into who the donor was, what was the amount received, how it has been spent, if the donor had put any conditions in place, and with that funding, what was the outputs that was achieved, if it was cash or in kind. So there's just more information in terms of the donor funding. The next section speaks to, again, the capital investment and the commentary regarding any capital investment. Now, capital investment would be whether there was investment in infrastructure or in property, plant and equipment. And specifically for our infrastructure departments, there is a further explanation of the various infrastructure projects that is delivered. You will also have insight, or you would be provided with information should there be plans to either close or downgrade any facilities, what is the maintenance of the infrastructure, as well as any developments that are expected to impact on the current expenditure. So here, this section under capital investment and commentary is important to understand the capital investment of the province, and each of the entities that deals with infrastructure, they would go into a lot of detail here. For the departments that are not capital intensive, or that is not in the built environment of infrastructure, they would normally give you an explanation of any investments that's been made into capital assets that is used to run the organization. So for an institution like Provincial Treasury, you'd have an indication of if there had been capital expenditure, what they had spent their money on, and in most cases, it would be the infrastructure and IT equipment, because the IT is used by Provincial Treasury to deliver the service. On the next slide, that covers the performance information. It is an important section because it puts in words what the financial statements does in Part E. The next section speaks to the governance information, and predominantly what you'd find here is a paragraph or a section that deals with the risk management of an institution, and this is normally completed both by the department in conjunction with .P under the corporate services. So there will be an indication of the risk management that the department has implemented, and there would also be a section that deals with fraud and corruption. There's a brief description of the fraud prevention plans, the mechanisms that the institution has implemented to prevent any fraud, as well as all of the cases that gets reported and what the department or the entity does in terms of minimizing conflict of interest. There's also a brief description in terms of the processes that have been implemented, as well as discussing various aspects of conflict of interest. Another part of the Part C of the governance information is where the department and institution will indicate what is their code of conduct. They will give you they'll give you sections about the health and safety, environmental issues. They'll also indicate the various portfolio committees, the dates of meetings, the members that are related to those portfolio committee meetings, and importantly, there is also a section that deals with scope resolutions. So every department is required to take note of the scope resolutions of prior years and give in the annual report an update. And I think that closes the accountability cycle when the members of SCOPA has specific resolutions in the 1 year, a department has to report on it in the annual report in the following year. In terms of additional information that comes under the governance information is whether or not there had been modifications to the audit report in prior years and what the department has done to deal with those key issues that came out from the Auditor General's report. There's also a section that will discuss the internal control units within the department, who is seen as one of the assurance providers. It is seen as an arm that the department and specifically the CFO's office can implement to ensure that there is a first level of assurance which is independent of management, but still under the guide of the Chief Financial Officer. So the internal control unit will tell you what are the processes that have been implemented to ensure that there are different levels of assurance within that department. Internal audit and audit committees, there will be a brief description of the work that has been done by internal audit, the various sections that they have been covered, and there will also be a summary and a list of key issues that has been highlighted in terms of the internal audit work that has been done. Importantly, you would also have an independent statement from the audit committees that would indicate the level of work and detail that the audit committees had gone into with the department. And you'd normally have a section by the audit committee report. There would be a specific report indicating specifically what they would have looked at, what their commentary is in terms of their independent understanding and their independent assurance that they provide for the important work done by the audit committees. They would also give you the audit committees would also give you the audit committees would also give you an evaluation of the annual financial statements. So before the annual financial statements are submitted to audit, to the Auditor General, the audit committees also reviews those financial statements as a last bite at the cherry before it goes into the auditing process. This is an important part. It is written in the guidelines for audit committees that there be a review of the annual financial statements, and the audit committee actually does that so that the department can put their best set of financial statements forward when they do submit it to the Auditor General. Then again, these are just extra slides in terms of what needs to be covered by the audit committee, and there is a detailed analysis or a detailed report that the committee members, if anything in the governance part of the annual report, the committee members wanted a condensed summary of the Part C, I would suggest that you first go to the report of the audit committee because it covers all the previous sections under Section C. There would also be a statement regarding the BBBEE, the broad-based Black economic empowerment compliance performance information. Again, National Treasury has taken the lead on reporting on the broad-based Black economic empowerment, and all the departments and the public entities have been guided by what is the minimum that they need to disclose in the financial statements or in the annual report as it relates to BBBEE compliance. The next section is 13 slides that speaks to the human resource management. And if the chair would allow me, I would necessarily only go through the first 2 slides to give you an indication of what lives within the human resource management section of Part D of the annual report. So Part D will give you information on the legislation that governs human resources. It will give you an introduction to the human resources of a department or the public entity. It will give you a summary of personnel-related expenditure. In other words, how much has the department spent on the personnel that's employed in the department?
Apologies, Mr. Hadi. I'm just quickly going to find out. Honorable Brinkhuis, is that a point of order? I see your hand is raised.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Chair, I just wanted to inquire if the department is going to read the whole presentation. I see the presentation is almost more than 50 slides. Yeah, I'm just ascertaining if the department is going to complete the whole presentation and then we'll be allowed questions, or are they going to pause at a certain stage here in the presentation? Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Member Brinkhuis, as indicated in the beginning of the meeting, questions and answers will be after the presentation. Given that we're already more than halfway through the first presentation, and this presentation is more of a refresh of matters previously known already in the annual reports, I would like us to finish both presentations first and then open to questions and answers, especially since the first presentation is majority 90% related to the format of the annual report. So I will then take questions and answers afterwards.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair.
No problem. Thank you so much. Mr. Ardeen, you may go ahead.
Thank you, Chairperson. So as I was saying, the section that deals with human resource management, there is a section that deals with personnel related costs, and that would tell you what the department has spent on the personnel for delivering the services that department has been set up to do. There's also an indication of employment and vacancies within the department. And this is important because you'd have an understanding of the vacancy rate within the department. The department would also give you an indication if there had been any jobs that were evaluated or re-evaluated. It also gives you an explanation of employment changes. What are the key things that the department had to withstand in order to be sustainable in terms of the employment matters? There's an indication of the employment equity, and here you have a detailed analysis of the various on the various levels of personnel, the various employment equity targets that is set up by National for each of the departments in the country to meet. You would also have an indication of the signing of performance agreements by the senior management members, senior management service members. And then there's also an indication of performance rewards given to, if there were any performance rewards, there would be an indication of those performance rewards. The department would also then go into what they have done in terms of filling of SMS posts and specifically dealing with employee performance. There's a section that deals with foreign workers and leave utilization. And I think specifically for this year, the leave utilization would be a key area to consider because people have been working from home, and the statistics around the leave would be an important area from an oversight perspective. There's also an indication in terms of HIV and AIDS as well as the health promotion programs, and that seeks to look at the mental as well as the physical health of the employees of an organization. Then there would be sections that deals with labor relations, skills development, and injury on duty. And this is more about, part D is more about how well the department takes care of the employees that is employed by it. What are the various matters that they've had to address in relation to the employees? And then there's also, outside of the employees, but supporting the work done by the employees, is a section that will deal with whether or not the department has utilized consultants, and I think it's section 316 of the annual report. So the consultants is an important aspect of the additional resources that a department or entity has employed to deliver its services. And then lastly, you would also have an indication of severance packages. Chair, if you would allow me, I'm going to skip the next couple of slides because this one slide, slide 28, captures every section of the human resource. It's an important reference slide, but if you needed to understand under each of the bullet points what happens or what can be expected to be found in those sections, the following slides, which I will just breeze through, the following slides will give
you can skip some of the detailed information. The assumption is always that members have read their respective slides and presentations, but since this is our third year in the current term going through annual reports, a majority of the formatting has not changed. You can assume that members will ask if there's anything in particular that they need clarity on. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'll try and wrap up in the next 5 minutes. The last part of the annual report is really the financial information. Now, we start off with an important slide that speaks to, and I'm sure that the Auditor General will speak to this. It's really about the audit opinions. What we've done is for the members to note that on the left-hand side of the presentation, it gives you the degree of the audit opinion and the severity of what it means. So in terms of when a department or entity receives a disclaimer, it is the worst type of opinion that they can ever achieve. An adverse opinion, it's a negative opinion where the Auditor General gives opposing views. A qualified opinion is also a negative opinion. Then you get into the last two. The second from the bottom is financially unqualified audit opinion with other matters. This basically says that your financial statements is a true and fair reflection. However, take note, there are either matters under the performance information or there are matters under the compliance with laws and regulations. And for that reason, you haven't achieved the gold standard of clean audit. And then the last part of this presentation is where you have financially unqualified audit opinion with no other matters. And that is the one that all of the departments and the public entity strives to achieve, which is known as, colloquially in South Africa, it's known as your clean audit. And essentially, that is a report card that says your financial statements are in order, you have no issues with your performance information, and you have no issues to be reported under your compliance with laws and regulations. In summary, then, for the current year, in terms of the audit outcomes for the 2021 financial year, 19 out of the 25 institutions in the Western Cape has received clean audit outcomes from the Auditor General. 4 institutions has received an unqualified audit opinion with other matters that needs to be taken note of. Under qualified, not a single department or entity has achieved a qualified audit report. Obviously, no one has achieved adverse, and no one has achieved a disclaimer. And then lastly, at the end of the financial year and at the end of the audit process, there are still 2 audits that are outstanding, and it's because of technical matters, and the province has opted to follow the alternative resolution process, where a matter is of such a technical nature that we require National Treasury to provide an outcome to provide their view on a particular matter. So for this current year, 23 audits have been finalized. There are 2 audits that's still in the process with National Treasury. So out of the 25, 23 had been finalized. The detail of each of the departments in a summary is available for the members. These are the ones that is relevant to the departments. The next slide will speak to what is relevant to the public entities, and it is just 2 important reference slides if you wanted to see with the portfolio that you are possibly busy with, that you have to give oversight. These 2 slides will give you a summary of what the audit outcomes were. Then in terms of the annual financial statements, and this is where there's the representation of how the money has been spent. Again, the formats have been prescribed by National Treasury. Importantly, the modified cash standard, meaning reporting on how cash was used and how cash had been spent. This is how departments prepare the financial statements. You will find an appropriation statement with the notes. There's a statement of financial performance, which basically speaks to the operations of an organization. There's a statement of financial position, which is previously known as the balance sheet. And then you have secondary information, and that deals with the disclosure notes that supplements the financial statements. The secondary information is an important leg of the reporting cycle because it gives you more insight in terms of what is happening from a note disclosure. It would give you indication of what are the contingent liabilities that you will not necessarily see on the face of the financial statements, but these notes, as written by National Treasury, is seen as an important part of the financial statements to give you an explanation of, had we been in an accrual environment, these matters would have been taken up in the financial statements. But for the fact that we are dealing with cash environment, you would see this more enhanced secondary information. The information is also there so that it starts preparing the departments to move to accrual accounting. Again, the next few slides, the differences between our annual reports for the departments and the public entity. Largely, the departments and entities are almost exactly the same. They have to give their general information. They have to give performance information. They also have to give a statement on the governance. The section on Part D isn't as elaborative because it's not that necessary for the public entities. And then importantly, they have the financial information, which is subject to rigorous auditing by the Auditor General. Lastly, members, to note that over the last 2 years that there's been an extensive discussion around irregular expenditure, and we thought that we would just provide the members with a quick summary of the irregular expenditure, because this is an item that is ballooning in the country, and thankfully we have it under control within the Western Cape. So irregular expenditure, very quickly, is expenditure that is incurred in contravention of, or that is not in accordance with, a requirement of any applicable legislation. It doesn't mean that the money has been wasted, that the money has been stolen, or that any fraud has been committed. It is an indicator that somewhere along in the process, there's been some non-compliance. That non-compliance has expenditure attached to it, which must be investigated by management. Now, with any irregular expenditure, let me say that when there is non-compliance, not all non-compliance relates to or results in irregular expenditure, but you can be assured that all irregular expenditure has come from some form of non-compliance. Importantly, what National Treasury had done last year was to remove departmental policies from the irregular expenditure definition. And what that means is there might be a law and a regulation, and the department might have further implemented departmental policies. Where a department goes against its own policy, that is a matter for internal handling. That is not something that will result in irregular expenditure. The only thing that will result in irregular expenditure is non-compliance with a main act or the regulations that speaks to that act. And importantly, it does speak to any applicable legislation. What we've done in the province is the National Treasury had delegated the condonation of irregular expenditure to the province. We had then set up a committee to review every single irregular expenditure in the province, to recommend to the head of Treasury, who is the condoning authority, what to do with the irregular expenditure. Now, this is a very rigorous process, and it's also subject to audit. Every single irregular expenditure must be tabled with the condonation working committee. We evaluate all the evidence that goes with that irregular expenditure, and we then make a final determination for recommendation. So you have the assurance from the Provincial Treasury that irregular expenditure is high on the agenda of the Provincial Treasury in terms of resolving any of the matters that get tabled. Then lastly, very quickly, just the last slide would give you some key changes that has come in from the National Treasury on the annual report guide. And Chairperson, that is the sum total of the presentation for the members today. I thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask that the AG also does their presentation, given that that particular one deals with the expenses relating to the similar formatting.
Good morning, Chairperson and honourable members. My name is Ashley Olkers. I will just ask Gavin van der Hoven to flight the slides, if he can, possibly. All right. Thank you, Gavin. So, Chairperson, this is an overview of the Western Cape Provincial audit outcomes for the period 2020-2021. The PFMA specifically relating to the departments and the provincial treasuries. This is just our reputation, promise, and our mission and our vision. So it's spelled out there, Chairperson, the role of the Auditor General and what we are envisaging to be. Gavin? So our messages from the previous year, this is what this slide indicates. It's our messages from the previous year's general report. The first section in the slide, you will see there that clean audit outcomes were achieved against the background of troubled disruptions and to our normal operations as a result of the COVID pandemic. But there was a strong leadership tone set at the top. We had the second section would indicate to you that we had some findings in relation to the Department of Education in the prior year, which was basically mainly related to the performance information where they had, misstatements reported in their performance information. As far as the financial statements were concerned last year, we indicated there that the provinces, submitted quality financial statements for the prior year, And then on the other side of the slide, we're just highlighting the increasing trend in irregular expenditure, but we can get to that later. Furthermore, we basically indicated on the last section of the slide, we indicated there that strong controls needs to be maintained in the area of performance reporting and financial management, and also that the oversight structures should oversee, the performance and financial governance at the various departments. Chair, thank you, Gavin. You can go to the next slide. So our message from the 2020-2021 audit outcomes, you will see that the line on top, which we call the tagline, is we indicating that there's a robust control environment within the province. However, legislative interpretations poses a risk to compliance. So here, Chairperson, the previous speaker has indicated, had touched on the issue of irregular expenditure. What we've picked up is that, procurement findings throughout for the current year, there were some procurement findings again reported, which resulted in irregular expenditure increasing from 287 million in the prior year to 328 million in the current year. The main contributor to this irregular expenditure was the Department of Human Settlements. And they reported contributed about 87% of the provincial irregular expenditure, and it mainly related to one procurement that the department has done. The province's closing irregular expenditure balance has also significantly increased from the two prior years, 2 years ago, which is 2018-19, largely due to the irregular expenditure experienced at the Department of Human Settlements. Gavin? So our message from 2021 and on the audit outcomes, what we are encouraging the province to do is when there are issues of legislative complexity and legislative interpretations, or where there is departures that the province wants to seek from the prescribed legislation, we indicate here that the department should seek the guidance, or the province should seek the guidance of the National Treasury on the issues of complexities when it comes to legislation, as well as seeking departures from the prescripts of the legislation or guidance issued by the National Treasury. Because a chairperson, as an audit office, we are auditing against the legislative prescripts prescribed by the National Treasury. So if those are not followed, it will result in the irregular expenditure where expenditure has been incurred, as indicated by the previous speaker. Sometimes we find that it's as a result of departures where the provincial or the National Treasury hasn't given their approval to those departures. So also the next 3 bullet points relates to a further improvement in accountability. We're indicating there that increased or strengthened insurance should be provided in the area of supply chain management as soon as control weaknesses are identified. Also, we indicate that strong control should be maintained in the area of financial reporting and performance reporting, and also for action plans to be implemented and monitored for the Department of Education and Casidra, where we picked up some findings on performance reporting. And then also the oversight structures to maintain their functioning and oversight procedures in relation to performance and governance at departments and entities. We need that's already strong within the province, but we're encouraging it to be maintained, Chair. So the next slide just goes overview of the audit outcomes, and I think this was also touched on by the previous speaker. So here is our slide, and this slide indicates the movement over a 3-year period. You would notice that it starts from 2018-19, and then it runs to 2020-2021, which is the current year's audit outcomes. So you would see there's 15 departments that we have as clean or unqualified with no findings, which makes up about 71% of the total audit outcomes. The second yellow circle that we see is for unqualified with findings. So you had unqualified on the financial statements, but you had some other areas in the area maybe of compliance or in the area of predetermined objectives that were reported in the audit report. So that was 19% of the total auditees that we've audited. And then we had 2 audits outstanding for the current audit cycle or the current audit cycle of the PFMA, which was about 10% of the total auditees that we had. And those total audits were the audits for the Provincial Treasury and the Department of Community Safety. The previous speaker has already indicated that a process is being followed in relation to those 2 departments, but we're hoping for the outcome of that process to be finalized or to reach its conclusion soon. Kevin? This slide, Chairperson, just gives an overview of the outcomes for the key service delivery departments. Now, the key service delivery departments, as is indicated on top of the rows that you will see there where we report the audit outcomes. And so those are indicated as the Department of Health, the Department of Education, Public Works and Transport, and then Human Settlements. So both Health and Public Works, they received a clean audit outcome for the current year, whilst the other 2 departments have unqualified with findings, which is the Education Department. They had findings on their predetermined objectives, and then Human Settlements, which had non-compliance findings mainly reported for them. So yeah, Gavin, you can go. So in terms of the quality of the financial statements, you would see that from previous years, the submission rate for financial statements is 100%, but for the current financial year, we're only at a 95% on-time submission rate. The Department of Education were late in their submission for their financial statements, hence 95%. Then the quality of financial statements submitted for audit, again, the quality was 95%. There we had some misstatements at the Department of Human Settlements, which created the 95% that we see there. Previous years it was 100%. And then the quality of published financial statements after the Auditor General allowed for corrections to be made to those financial statements is 100%. Thanks, Jim. This slide just gives you an overview of the financial health of the province. And you would see it's basically all the departments. The financial health for 63% or 12 departments was in good condition or financial health condition. And then for 7 departments, it wasn't, the financial health was of concern. What we're indicating here, what I can say here is that the departments that are in good financial health are mainly departments, the key service delivery departments like your education, your health, and so on. So those departments are in good financial health. The departments that are not where there's of concern is basically the other departments, the smaller departments that is not as big as education and health. Fruitless and wasteful expenditure, it has crept up a bit, but it's still under, it's about 900,000 Rand, which is only at about 16 auditees, but it's something to keep the eye on. It's a small amount, and it has been smaller in the prior years, but it is creeping up a little, as we see there at the bottom of the slide. Then non-compliance remains relatively low for the province. The most of the non-compliance that we're picking up is in the area of procurement and contract management, the quality of the submitted financial statements, and the late submission of the financial statements. I've already touched on the quality of the financial statements, which relates to the Department of Human Settlements mainly, and then the late submission of the financial statements. In terms of the other findings, it's mainly in the area of procurement and contract management. So with the supply chain management findings, this slide indicates you where we had findings on supply chain management. The findings might not necessarily be in the, all the findings might not be in the audit report. You would see there the gray part would give you an indication of findings that did hit the audit report, but most of the findings you would notice, ends up in the management report. So some of these findings, they can still result in irregular expenditure, even though it ends up in the management report. So the details of the non-compliance in the area of supply chain management is indicated here at the bottom of the slide. And you would see that, uncompetitive and unfair procurement processes, those are still the bulk of the supply chain management findings that we have. And then awards to employees within the service of the state, and then employees that fail to disclose interest in suppliers. On the right-hand side, we just give an indication of the the movements from the prior year, and there you would notice that the Gambling and Racing Board, as well as Casidra and Westgrove, there were improvements in their areas when it comes to supply chain management. In the area of supply chain management. So what we've also indicating there is that there's been senior management that took specific steps to improve the area of supply chain management. And when it comes to this which regressed, it's mainly the Department of Human Settlements, where we had some non-compliance findings in relation to supply chain management. And you would see there that it related to mandatory subcontracting, functionality criteria not stipulated, and in addition, some awards were made where suppliers' tax matters were not in order. So those are just a summary of the key areas in supply chain management where we had some findings. Thanks, Gavin, Chair. Next slide, Gavin. This slide basically just emphasized what I already mentioned before. You would notice that the key contributors to the irregular expenditure, which this slide indicates, the total is 328 million for the province. The key the biggest contributors to the irregular expenditure for the current year incurred was the Department of Human Settlements, Health, and Department of Public Works and Transport. And you would see there that human settlements was the main reason for the massive increase in irregular expenditure. There was, however, I can communicate that there were no qualifications in the area of irregular expenditure. Next slide, Gavin. So this is just the irregular expenditure year on year, the closing balance, and also how the irregular expenditure has been dealt with. So you would see on the left, if you look at 2018-19, we had 75 million closing balance of irregular expenditure that is crept up to 545.8 million in 2020-2021. And there on the block next to that, you would just see how much of that irregular expenditure has been, recovered, or in the process of recovery, how much of it has been condoned, what amount has been written off, and which amounts has been has not been dealt with. The previous speaker has indicated that the condonement process for irregular expenditure, or dealing with irregular expenditure within the province, has been delegated to the Provincial Treasury from the National Treasury. And again, the main contributors is indicated on the right-hand side, which is Human Settlements and the Departments of Health. So yeah, so in terms of the consequence management, we're indicating that the departments are dealing with the issues of irregular expenditure when it comes to investigating it and following it up and recovering or handling or dealing with the consequences relating to irregular expenditure. Next slide, Gavin. So in terms of the performance information, you would notice that mainly the performance information, similarly to the financial statements for the province, the quality of submitted performance report, we indicate there is 63%, and the quality of the published performance report, 83% after we allowed for corrections to be made. Below that, the top part, we have the part relating to where we had most prevalent, in the areas where the findings were most prevalent, and that was basically speaking to achievement reported not being reliable, and then services, indicators, and targets not useful, and then no underlying records or planning documents. There was 0% for that. But in terms of the services or achievement reported not reliable, what that part tells you is that what's being reported, it's not, the services may or may not have been delivered if the reporting is not reliable. So your performance report gives you an overview of the services that has been delivered. So if there's errors in that reporting, it means that either the services might not have been delivered, or the services could have been over-delivered and under-reported, or under-reported and over-reported and under-delivered. And then in terms of the performance indicators and targets, measures used to plan for service delivery was not good enough to enable delivery of planned services. Thank you, Gavin. You can move over to the next slide. Chairperson, this is our presentation to this budget committee. If there are any questions, you are most welcome to ask us those questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Members, taking into account that we will also throughout this reporting period be going into the different departments in the annual reporting, I'm going to now take questions on these two presentations specifically. You can just put up your hands. Okay, if there are none, I am happy to jump into questions. Okay, I'll then ask my questions first. On slide 11 to the Auditor General, you indicated there a little arrow that goes up next to the number 2, but 2 is less than 3, and 11% is less than 17%. So I just need a little bit of clarity on how to read that particular slide. And then on slide 12, similarly, is the number 1 that indicates 5%. If you can quickly go to slide 12 as well, please. 12, yes, there we go. There's there in the grey section at 2020-21, there's 1 that says 5% with material findings. But that's also less than 3 in the previous year, which was 16%. But the little arrow goes up. So if I can just get some clarity on the interpretation on how to read that slide. And then if you just quickly go to slide 15, please. 15. Thereby, quality of published performance reporting, there's a little arrow that goes up, but 83 again is less than 88. If I can just also get some clarity on that reporting. In general, I'm counting 23 unqualified and clean audits with the 2 outstanding. And if I divide that by 25, I get to approximately 92%, which is quite wonderful. Take into account that we're still waiting for the other 2. So those are my follow-up questions depend on the answers to those. Thank you. I see Member Nkondlo's hand and Member Mvimbi in that order. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I only have one question. My question relates to this irregular expenditure. And the question says, if this is a matter, I think there's a slide that says, is it about not attending to consequence management? I'm not sure what does inadequate consequence remain a root cause? And the response by AG says no. And if they can just clarify that, because if you are then presenting to us an information that says this particular department and this irregular expenditure emanate from 2018 and it's 2021. This is almost 3 years. This has been repeating. So what then, if it is not inadequate consequences as a root cause, what then is the root cause? And actually, is this issue of irregular expenditure a non-issue? Because I think the posture that is being put here is just a non-issue. Yes, it's there. It's not something that it's important because it is attended to. There are meetings. There are reports to say that the department is dealing with it. Is it supposed to be? So I'm just trying to understand logic around auditing and the explanation around what irregular expenditure is and how it should be dealt with, so that it doesn't come here as a matter if indeed it's just a minor issue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Nkondlo. Member Mvimbi.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I promise you we did not caucus, me and Honorable Nkondlo. My question is very much similar to her, but it's on is on irregular expenditure. Especially, it's just my question emanates from slide 51, I think, and slide 52 of the department, the Treasury Department, where there seems to be now a redefinition of irregular expenditure outside of the one that is actually legal, a definition. Because I think if I was listening correctly, I think the presenter even went as far as saying that there is actually nothing irregular if you break your own internal policy. So, but then if you, when I was listening to the Auditor General's presentation on irregular expenditure, their definition of irregular expenditure is based on the law and the law that governs our country. And there seems to be some kind of a misunderstanding, it looks like, between the Auditor General as well as the Treasury Department on this. So, and I think also there was if maybe we, especially the department, can just give an example where they say that, I think at some point it was even indicated that, look, there are instances of irregular expenditure that are very minor because of internal policy, and those can be rectified easily. It might be good maybe if the department, the Treasury in particular, can just give some example of this. It might be good that it can be illustrated by example so that we can actually understand. And I think maybe it might be good if this question is answered on irregular expenditure by both the department and the Auditor General as to whether, what definition of irregular expenditure do we go by? Do we go by the legal definition of irregular expenditure as is defined in law, or as indicated by the department that, look, there is nothing really irregular if you break your own internal policy that you've made yourself? I think if I got the explanation correctly. So my question really is on irregular expenditure, Chairperson.
No problem, Member Mvimbi. I didn't interpret the two slides, two different presentations as conflicting, but I will leave it to the AG and Provincial Treasury. I do know the Provincial Treasury's one relates to formatting of the reports and the AG one relates to specific amounts, but Mr. Hardeen and Mr. Olkers is more than capable of assisting you with that. Thank you. Member Brinkhuis.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, in the presentation on slide 12, linking performance with budgets, it is stated there the departments are required on the last line. The departments are required to report on how expenditure contributed to achievement Just get my slide again. To the achievement of outputs. On that, Chair, first of all, I want to welcome the presentation by the department, and to the Auditor General, the reporting on how expenditure contributes to alleviating poverty and to eradicate inequality in the Western Cape. How much detail can the department provide us to statistics with regard to how inequality is being eradicated in the Western Cape? How much detail can the department provide us when it comes to reporting on how expenditure contributes to eradicating inequality in the Western Cape? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Maseko.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think, Chair, my question is going to be just direct. I want to find out from the Auditor General if there is a case where irregular expenditure has impacted on the end user or on service delivery. And if that is the case, if that is not the case, is there an indication that there is in the legislatively something that we have to tighten the screws so that there's no a loophole where the policies of the supply chain management or the procurement can allow irregular expenditure outcomes to be there, even though the policies are not followed by the departments or the municipality or whatever the case that may be? I think that's my question, Chair. I'll do the follow-up after they answer this.
Thank you so much. We will then start with Provincial Treasury's answers, and then we'll go over to AG, and then I'll open up for follow-up questions and new questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chairperson. I will deal with Member Nkontlu's first question, and that relates to is the department not attending to consequence management? As I indicated, National Treasury has delegated the condonement of irregular expenditure to the Provincial Treasury. Now, a department that submits a request to the Provincial Treasury for condonement, they have to assert to the Condonation Working Committee that consequence management has occurred. If consequence management is not included in the submission made to Provincial Treasury will not even look at the submission. So with every submission, a department has to confirm the individual that was responsible for the irregular expenditure or the decision that resulted in irregular expenditure. There has to be a demonstration that consequence management has occurred. Consequence management can vary from a disciplinary to a letter from the head of department to indicate that this action or this behavior is against the law, and that the individual will have been disciplined for that action. So I can assure the members that consequence management is part of every submission that is submitted to the Condonation Working Committee for Provincial Treasury. As to Member Mvimbi's question regarding the irregular expenditure and the definition of irregular expenditure, seeking clarity, the irregular expenditure definition is very clear. It says that irregular expenditure is non-compliance with a law or its regulations, and that is any law or its regulations. So every submission that we get or every transaction that occurs, we first subject it to the law, the Major Act, and then the regulations. If none of those conditions are met, it cannot be classified as irregular expenditure because irregular expenditure is defined. So in the case where a department's own policy has been contravened, that is a matter for the department to deal with for their own internal processes. But as soon as a law or a regulation has been broken, it immediately has the classification of irregular expenditure if that law or regulation has money attached to it. For an example, to better clarify irregular expenditure that is of an administrative nature, perhaps I can give one of the most common things that comes through. An example would be a department is supposed to provide 3 quotations for an expense. Sometimes what happens, and with the utilization of the electronic purchasing system, a department may put out the quotation, RFQ, to get quotes from service providers. What happens sometimes is that a department only gets 2 quotes. Now the department has put it out there. We need all of our service providers for that particular commodity to provide us quotes. If the department only receives 2 quotes, in law, they should have evaluated 3 quotes, but they've only received 2. The department may then go ahead with the quotation, select the relevant service provider, and issue that to the service provider, the successful service provider. But in law, because the law says you must get 3 quotes, the department only submitted 2 quotes. That will then result in irregular expenditure, and when the submission is made to the condonation working committee, we will evaluate what did the department do. If they use the electronic purchasing system, it is open to everybody that is registered for that commodity. But if only 2 people, it's really outside of the department's control. So we recognize this as a regular expenditure in terms of the definition of the law, but in terms of administration, whilst the law has not been strictly complied with, no, there was value for money for the service provider who had provided the service. The department had received something in return, and there is no losses to the department. And that is the criteria that we apply to every single submission that has been made. Then as to the member Brinke's question regarding the statistics of inequality as well as the poverty, when it comes to the performance information, again, for the sections under performance information, the National Treasury Guidelines gives gives you a framework within which to report. What the department brings in there, it depends on what the department has in terms of evidence, because whatever is in there as evidence, the Auditor General has at its disposal a review of that evidence to confirm whether or not what the department is presenting in other parts of the annual report, it's not conflicting with the annual financial statements. Then to Member Maseko, on the question of irregular expenditure and how has it impacted the end user of the service delivery. Now, in the case of previously indicated, where we have 3 quotes but only 2 quotes, the end user still gets the service delivery. It is the department that hasn't strictly obtained the 3 quotes, but the end user, the person who was going to receive the services, they would have still received the services. The fact that there was 2 quotes instead of 3 quotes has resulted in the irregular expenditure, but the end user doesn't suffer. What we are very sure of when we're looking at the condonation is that, number 1, the department, when they pay for a service, that it is a service that they have returned, and number 2, that they have achieved value for money. What value for money means is the department hasn't necessarily paid outside of the norm for a particular service, and that we can only do by comparing what did quote 1 say and what did quote 2 say. And normally in the normal evaluation, most of the departments would go for the lowest quote. So on that basis, we do look at service delivery. Thank you, Chair. I hope that has responded to the questions raised by the members.
Thank you, Mr. Olkers.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, on your question on the slide, that arrows, you must look at it from the first year onwards, so not year on year. So basically from the first year, you need to consider the arrow. So for example, on this slide, Gavin, maybe you can go to the report on predetermined objectives. I think that was slide number 11. Yeah. So here you must look at it from the 2018-19 period compared to the latest period, and then the previous year similarly. So for all the others, it will be similar, Chairperson. That's just on that one.
Hang on, quickly go to slide 11. Slide 11 quickly. On slide 11, the first year, 2018, is 2, and 2020 is also 2, and they're both 11. So then that arrow is green, but on other places where the stuff is the same, you put the little yellow thing that goes sideways. So that's what I'm trying to figure out, how to read that.
Okay. If you look at that slide, you will see the bottom bar. There's about 18 oddities, where in the top bar there's 19 oddities. So we added, there was another oddity added to the top. So if you look in the bars, you will see 16 plus 2, which is the 89%, and the 11%, 16 plus 2 on 2018-19. That's 89%. And then if you go up to 2021-20, there was an oddity added, which I think is the Atlantis SEZ audit. It's now 17 oddities and 2 for the material findings part. So that arrow then was made to move up because the number of oddities is not the same. Chairperson,
okay.
Thanks.
And then slide 12, we can quickly go there. So is that then the same way it went? Because there's, you see the 1 and then you see the 5%. And in this 2019 is 3 and 16, and 2018 is 1 and 6%.
Yeah, that would be similarly. Let me just see, Chairperson, you again from the 2018-19, you would see that the number of, I might just check which part it is now, 8, 16, 17, and 18, 19. Yeah, it's also the number of oddities that would have increased. And you would see that the ones that, you know, it's basically the total number of oddities that has been increasing over the years where we had supply chain management findings. So that's why that arrow is moving basically as in the upper, moving up.
Okay.
So that's
basically because material findings have decreased, the arrow is green and it goes up.
Yes, that's basically
okay.
it.
And then slide 15.
Maybe slide 15, Gavin.
There it shows 88 in 2018, 2019, and then 2019, 2020, and then 2020, 2021. But the arrow is then green upwards. So I just want to understand that one.
That one might be an error. I must just check it. I can come back to you on that one because I also picked that one up. You know, it should read from 2018-19 till the current year. So for the movement over the 3 years, the quality of the published performance reports is 83%. So I'll speak to the you know, the creator of the slides and revert back to you, Jay.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll ask my follow-ups then after the other members, but you can go on with the answers, but just hang on quickly. Member Nkondlo, is that a point of order?
No, Chair, it's not a point of order, it's a follow-up.
Okay, I'm just going to allow the AG to answer all of the questions, and then I'm going to open for a second round, but I've noted your hand for follow-up questions. Thank you.
Yes, Chairperson. Then on the regular expenditure, the definition of the regular expenditure, I think the previous speaker has answered that question. We have a consistent, you know, we measure the regular expenditure against the PFMA definition of irregular expenditure, and we audit against that. So it's nothing different from what the Provincial Treasury sees in terms of the legislation. We audit it the same, you know, in the same manner because it's basically a PFMA definition that everybody must adhere to from the department. The AG needs to interpret it in that, you know, what's stated in the PFMA, and similarly the Provincial Treasury and the National Treasury does that. The question on how much detail one can get from the department. The annual reports are those documents that the department normally publishes for use, when it comes to service delivery matters. But I think if there's any additional information that the member requires in relation to service delivery matters, then I would encourage the member to approach the department if there's any specific questions around a particular indicator or key performance indicator or target which the department has reported, because that information is essentially contained in the report on predetermined objectives, which is part of the annual report, and the member can interrogate the department then on the outcomes of that report if the member has questions. So the member needs to basically approach the department for any additional information. What the Auditor General just indicates in its audit report is to say what the department has reported is valid, accurate, and complete. And then in terms of the irregular expenditure impact on service delivery, I think that was Member Maseko, where irregular expenditure, impacted service delivery, and something needs to be done there. I think previously the previous speaker has also alluded to this. Not all irregular expenditure does necessarily mean that the service has not been rendered, but it means in the process of procuring the service or the good, there has been some non-compliance. Now, it can be a case where a tax clearance certificate was not obtained or other procurement-related findings, like, for example, local content was not adhered to, etc., etc. But there, I think what the member or what oversight needs to do is to understand what gave rise to the irregular expenditure, whether it's an issue of, just a compliance matter where you didn't obtain a tax clearance certificate, something to that effect, or whether it's something where there could have been a potential loss in relation to the department. For example, where the department, didn't follow a proper competitive bidding process and maybe overpaid for the suppliers, the goods and services that it received from the suppliers because it didn't follow a proper competitive bidding. There might have been people that came in cheaper. So I think for the services that was rendered or the goods that was bought. So I think for each irregular expenditure that's being reported, it's crucial that members interrogate that irregular expenditure to understand exactly what sits behind the irregular expenditure in relation to departments. As an example, human settlements is an example. They extended the contract where they shouldn't have extended the contract, where they provided services over and above their own properties, as an example, that they which should have actually been provided by some other government entity. So they then incurred a loss as human settlements, although, for example, in the case where they covered costs for another department, that would be a loss for human settlements and a gain for that other department. So it's basically to understand what sits behind the reporting of irregular expenditure, which is crucial that members should understand that, because in some instances it might lead to losses, in others it might not lead to losses. Chairperson, I think I've covered everything. I don't know if there's any further follow-ups in relation to the slides.
Thank you. Member Nkondlo has a follow-up. I have one follow-up. I want to just quickly see if there are any other hands. Okay, if none, Member Nkondlo, you may go ahead.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think following, on the last speaker, that I think that is actually what you are trying to do here as Parliament and as members, is to really try to understand what's behind this. And as AG is the one that has audited these departments as per the report, I think we would wish to get some kind of an understanding before we are sent to the actual departments, because yes, we shall have that opportunity from next week to go to the individual departments, but we would want to understand from the AG who has been auditing and has came to the conclusions that are presented into the report, so that there's a better appreciation and we hear their side as the AG of how they got to this together with the department when we're going there. So for me, once again, I think the latter speaker now speaks about, I think, makes mention of some of the possible reasons or sources of the irregular expenditure, because one is actually interested in that, and that's why my question earlier on, and the issue that says it may not necessarily have impacted service delivery because it could be a mere administrative fault. For me, it doesn't make sense, because if you talk about an irregular expenditure in a particular department that has actually recurred over a 3-year period, from 2018 right up to now, and it actually goes up in terms of the volumes to the amount of about 284.6 in human settlement. One would be interested, what is the source of this? And what is its impact to service delivery? But broadly, I think now it is indeed mentioned that human settlement would have incurred loss. And how do we deal with it as a matter that is actually urgent, that also get a similar attention that an unauthorized or wasteful expenditure would have received? I think for me, we would like, myself as a member, to get that particular understanding so that we don't keep on year in and year out deal with irregular expenditure as just another issue, something that is not serious, because we appreciate that if you consider the unauthorized and wasteful expenditure, I think it is said there that it has been maintained, and where it is, it's very low. And I think we want to get to that particular point, even with irregular expenditure, rather than getting, a repeated increase on irregular expenditure. So my follow-up, Chair, I think would have been to understand, according to the AG, the three main contributors that are mentioned, I think in slide 13, human settlement, health and transport and public works, from the AG's point of view, what has been, because these are said to be procurement related. And I think this is one issue that we've kept on discussing. I remember even in SCOPA around the issue of procurement capacity in the various departments, let alone in the oversight that is needed to be done by the provincial treasury. So for me, I'm really interested to understand exactly what are those procurement related findings that are actually causing irregular expenditure in these three departments at a high level. And I understand that the detail of those transactions will then be asked from the actual three departments when we meet them next week. But I'm interested to understand these procurement findings or challenges. What exactly are those issues? And are these things that have been repeating in terms of those specific procurement issues? If they can mention what they are, have they been repeating, in these various departments? And what then is the meaning of those in terms of the procurement function of those three departments? Unless it's things that, have just mushroomed only this year. But I think for me, it's important just to understand what in detail those procurement findings are. So I think, Chair, that was my follow-up in better understanding what the presentation, I think, is telling us, so that at least when I go to the next week meetings in SCOPA, I am better empowered to ask the questions to the various departments. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Nkondla. Member Maseko.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I just want to find out, as the last response to the irregular expenditure, it seems like irregular expenditure, it's like a moving target, that it has different interpretations all the time when we have to deal with the department, that what does it mean for this financial year? Now, if I have to ask the Auditor General, does the interpretation of irregular expenditure stand as a risk? Can we label it as a risk as it stands now, that we might have to have a legislative amendment to make sure that we enforce the supply chain management or the procurement to make sure that there's no that flip-flop of having the departments having to have the irregular expenditure outcome from the Auditor General, or you feel there is a need for that allowance for the department when sometimes, but if that is the case, why do we have the deviation that is there that can accommodate that? I'm trying to find out why is it not something that is regarded as a bad thing in a way with what happened. And I do understand that service delivery has happened. It's not a monetary loss, but I want to understand when are we going to be, like Member Ngodlo was saying, when are we going to be at the space where we don't have irregular expenditure because there is a policy that was not adhered to as the departments were doing their procurement. Do you see that as a risk that needs to be looked at, or you feel it has to be there to accommodate sometimes the needs that the departments have to adhere to make sure service delivery happens? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. My follow-up question, I think it's both to Provincial Treasury as well as to the AG. There was a slide on the AG's presentation indicating that in the beginning that legislative interpretations could pose a risk. Now, I know there has been obviously some unhappiness between everyone in the past few years, especially with the court case in agriculture between the department and the AG and the Department 1. And then I think there was an appeal and then the Department 1 again in terms of accounting. How does one put that information to the annual report? And then the outcome of the audit actually had to change positively. So I just want to understand, given that, again, there is concern regarding legislative interpretations, and given that it seems as if, because the two audits are outstanding, it's the Provincial Treasury one and Community Safety, if I remember correctly, that was escalated to get an opinion from National Treasury. If you could just explain to me what are the differences in opinion, because then at least if we know what is being disputed, it gives us more of an idea if it's just accounting types of entries and how one puts it into the books, or is it the substance of the amounts that is being disputed? So is it more quantitative or is it more qualitative? Is it administrative matter? Is it one of those things where, irrespective of how it's put into the books, the service delivery is still being delivered? If I can just get a little bit more indication as to what exactly are those legislative interpretations that are being raised. Thank you so much. Provincial Treasury, I think you can probably then go first and then the AG.
Thank you, Chairperson. Regarding the legislative interpretation that could possibly pose a risk, when the departments transact, they interpret the legislation to mean a particular thing. What then happens is they provide that evidence to the Auditor General. The Auditor General might look at the same information and say, well, we don't think that it should have happened this way. In terms of our reading of the laws, it should have happened in a different way. What then happens is there is loggerheads between the Auditor General and the department, and the only way to resolve that is to get a further interpretation from the authors of the legislation. And that has resulted in the current case, that has resulted where National Treasury is called upon. National Treasury is provided with the information from both the Auditor General as well as from the departments. And National Treasury then indicates, when we wrote the law, this is what we meant by the law. Now, anything and everything can be up to interpretation. More things than not are clear, but there are instances where there is specific guidance required from National Treasury. I think the Auditor General is best placed to indicate what are the legislative interpretation issues that have identified, And specifically for the departments that is currently in a process with National Treasury, I think that the scope of sessions with those departments would provide the members with more information. I certainly didn't prepare for the particular question as it relates to the specifics of the differences in interpretation. I can also say that in terms of Member Nkondlo's further follow-up question, in terms of the detail relating to the irregular expenditure, Member Nkondlo, what's been happening is specifically, let's talk about the Department of Human Settlements. Irregular expenditure, as indicated before, results from non-compliance with laws and regulations. So you may have, if you can sketch this, you may have in year one, the department goes into a transaction, and that covers multiple years of expenditure. When the department is then subjected to an audit, the auditors will say at the end of the financial year, this particular transaction is irregular. What then happens is the department will then either recognize it as potential irregular expenditure, and that will go into the financial statements. In the following year, the department will gather all of the evidence in relation to the alleged irregular expenditure. They will then submit it to the Condonation Working Committee. And all the while, before or during the submission to the Condonation Working Committee, expenditure will still be incurred on that original transaction. Depending on the veracity or the extent of the information pack that's supplied to the Condonation Working Committee, we may request more information, or we may indicate that this information that has been supplied is sufficient. At the time when the Condonation Working Committee sits and evaluates the irregular expenditure, they consider what was the actions that resulted in irregular expenditure, have there been losses to the department, what was the actual non-compliance that has occurred, has somebody been taken to task in terms of consequence management, and so there's a whole host of questions that we've asked. If the Condonation Committee is satisfied that all of the questions has been responded to appropriately by the department, a recommendation will then go to the head of Treasury in terms of whether, in the expert opinion of the Condonation Working Committee, that the department can be, let's say, the expenditure can be condoned because we have all the facts to make that assessment. The head of department will then apply his mind and either condone or not condone the expenditure. At the time when the Condonation Working Committee condones or recommends condonation, and at the time when the head of department condones the expenditure for that department, any subsequent expenditure on that irregular expenditure will now not be seen any longer as irregular expenditure. And then there's the process of correcting the information in the financial statements. So again, you may have year one irregular expenditure, year two continued irregular expenditure, but year three, because the expenditure has been condoned with all of the relevant facts, year three, the information would be appropriately removed from the financial statements, and you would not have that irregular expenditure now being reported in the third year under the main headings. What you may have is a narrative in the note that says the Condonation Committee, being the head of department, the delegated authority has condoned this expenditure, and there's a confirmation that there have been no losses, that there has been service delivery, and that consequence management has occurred. That's the response for me for Member Nkondlo, and then for Member Maseko, the last question in terms of should there be possibly legislative amendments that could eradicate irregular expenditure completely. I can say that National Treasury has indicated for the municipal space, they've indicated that they're setting themselves a target by 2024 to have irregular expenditure brought down to zero. Now, for as long as there are contradictions between what the PFMA or MFMA says and then any other laws that supports the PFMA and MFMA, for long as there isn't a golden thread between the two pieces of legislation, there may be interpretation issues. And whilst we strive to get irregular expenditure down to zero, please understand that every single transaction has a host of laws and regulations that needs to be complied with. And if any of the chains in that transaction is broken, it has the propensity of becoming irregular expenditure. So it is a continuous monitoring and reiterative process. As for the legislation that needs to be amended, the Provincial Treasury is constantly in contact with our National Treasury counterparts, that before any legislation becomes a law, that there is a proper commentary process, that we try and identify all of the possible loopholes, so that we do, when we issue or when the act becomes, when it is enacted, when the law is enacted, that there is as minimal interpretive issues that can emanate from any law or regulation that is passed by the national authors of these laws or regulations. Chairperson, I hope that has responded to the questions, and I'll give over to Ashley if there's anything additional that he wants to add from the Auditor General. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Olkers.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, I think my counterpart from the Provincial Treasury has covered most of the matters adequately. I think I just wanted to add is that it is, as I've indicated previously, for members to get just an understanding of what caused the irregular expenditure. I think that is the crucial part, that you need to make an assessment as to whether there was fraud or corruption or non-service delivery or what, or whether it was just as my Provincial Treasury colleague has indicated, whether there was just a breach in the legislation. But it's crucial that that doesn't really result in a loss. So it's crucial that one has to get an understanding of what was the cause for the irregular expenditure, and then make a determination, because not all irregular expenditure incurred are necessarily the same. So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to ask quickly, has the AFRI business case gone to the Constitutional Court yet? Because today is the 5th of November, and I thought that the PPP policies and so on would then automatically fall away on the 2nd of November.
Chair, I am not sure if it is gone. I cannot answer you on that one, Chair.
Okay, Provincial Treasury, do you have any knowledge yet? Because I know it went on appeal and it will affect all the preferential procurement in the country.
Chair, whilst this is not my area of expertise, I am aware that National Treasury and the DTIC is looking at this matter. I do understand that it is still under, that there are discussions happening at the national level. As for whether it's gone to the Constitutional Court, I cannot give feedback at this stage, but I would ask my the local OCPO to provide a response to the committee.
Thank you. I know it's already on appeal to the Constitutional Court. I just wanted to know if the Constitutional Court has made a judgment yet, because based on last year's judgment from the Constitutional Court, Parliament had 1 year to fix the regulations, and to my knowledge that has not been fixed. And if my interpretation is correct, then those regulations in terms of law, they all fall away. But if you can just give us an update in writing, that would be much appreciated. Thank you. Unless your colleague is online. Yes, no, maybe? Okay.
We will give you an update in writing, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you so much. Colleagues, are there any follow-up questions? Going once, going twice. Okay, thank you so much to Provincial Treasury as well as the Auditor General for their presentations today, as well as just refreshing us on the formatting that will occur during the annual reporting season. Given that members will now be dealing with internal committee business, I would like to then excuse the respective officials from the meeting so that you may go on with your daily business. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning.
Thank you, Chairperson, and goodbye to the members and the Chair.
Thank you. Goodbye. In the meantime, If we can just put up the first set of minutes, we will deal with resolutions at the end, if any. Ms. Kamish Ahmed, if you can just put up the first set of minutes for us, please. Okay. Thank you so much. This was the week when I went and performed my maid of honor duties. And I would like to thank Member Mackenzie, who at the time was acting chairperson. If we can just start first with the first page, go through the attendance first, so members can just check there for themselves. Okay, let's go down. Okay, that is page 1. If no edits, we can go to page 2. Could we just remove the extra space before the word which, please? Thank you. As well as before the full stop after 12:51 at the end. There we go. Okay, members, I think the only members from that meeting were present. If I could just see at the top quickly, please. Yeah, the only members who are present is members Brinkhuis, Mvimbi, and Philander. And alternate members, Alan, America, Nkondlo, Van der Westhuizen, and Wenger. If I could get a mover for the minutes, please.
I propose, Chairperson.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. With that, the minutes are then adopted. If we can then move on to the second set of documentation, which is the draft quarterly report. Okay. On the report, the first page, you will see there the register of names. You can go down. Page 1, can go to page 2. This has also been previously circulated. Okay, page, let's see there. Okay, we can go down to the next page. Go down. Okay, you may stop there just so the members can check. Okay, let's go down to page 5. You can just stop there as well, just so the members can check for themselves quickly. Okay, you can go down. Page 6. Okay, we can go down. Page 7, you can go down. You can just show members there quickly. We have a balance, just hang on quickly so members can see before we go into the line items. So members can see there's the 46 balance. You can go down. Okay, and then you'll see the line items for members. This has also been circulated previously. So that's just the line items of that amount. Okay, those are resolutions. You can go down. Thank you so much. You can go down. There we go. As you will see, some of these resolutions emanate from our previous workshop, and hopefully we'll be able to fit as many as possible into the next one. Where it says distributed to members, you can actually put it in black because it shouldn't be red anymore. But you can change the color afterwards. That's fine. Thank you. Okay, so those deal with thereby still awaiting PBO. I think PBO has sent us some information already now, but you must just check for me. So I do think that has been concluded. Thank you. Go down.
Chairperson, that's it. That's the end of the document.
I was at the end of the document. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And just remember to take the extra space out between the word fourth and quarter on that page. There's an extra. Okay, that's perfect. Thank you so much. Members, if you are happy with the document, if I could get a mover for the draft quarterly report. Member Philander.
Chairperson, I move that we adopt the report as presented.
Thank you so much. Is there a seconder for the report?
I second, Chair. Member Branges, I second.
Thank you, Member Branges. With that, the report is then adopted. Thank you so much. We will now move on to resolutions. Any resolutions based on the presentations?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Member Branges here. Chair, a resolution that I want to recommend is that the presentations that we have received throughout the year, not only this last meeting that we had now today, presentation, but if we could receive the presentations well in advance. I received my presentation for today's meeting only yesterday or the day before that, and it is quite a presentation, you know, to go through, and we all know it was election time now, and we were, as political party members, we were all engaged in, you know, waiting for the results and looking at the results and watching the results. So my resolution is that if we could receive our presentations of the budget committee meetings, if we could receive it maybe in a week in advance, if that is possible, Chair. Thank you very much.
No problem. I'm happy with that. Members, are you happy with that? Yes, no, maybe?
Agreed.
Okay, there we go. Thank you so much, Member Mvimbi. Okay, with that then, are there any other resolutions? If none, members, then thank you so much for engaging with us in this committee meeting. I wish you all well during the annual reporting season in terms of the different departments and entities, as well as with your reading homework, at your bed nightstand with all the different reports. With that, thank you, goodbye, stay safe and stay warm.